Life by the lake had always been my little slice of paradise. The shimmering water, the rustling trees, and the occasional visit from a curious deer, it was everything I'd ever wanted in a home. My property stretched right to the lakefront, a privilege I didn't take lightly. It was where my kids learned to fish, where we hosted summer barbecues, and where I found my peace after long days. But like all good things, it didn't stay perfect forever. Enter Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA and the human embodiment of a mosquito buzzing in your ear. Karen had been a thorn in my side since the day she moved in 3 years ago. Her friendly suggestions often felt more like orders, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. Still, I tried to keep the peace. She was just another nosy neighbor, I thought. How bad could it get? I got my answer last Saturday. I was sipping my morning coffee on the porch when I noticed a group of people down by the lake. They weren't the usual weekend kayakers or fishermen. No, these folks had lawn chairs, a cooler, and what looked like construction stakes. My lakefront property was turning into their personal picnic spot. I headed down to investigate, waving politely even as my blood started to simmer. "Good morning," I called out. "Can I help you folks?" A tall man with sunglasses and a smug expression turned to face me. "Oh hi. I'm Brad, Karen's cousin. She said this area was perfect for our weekend retreat." "Excuse me?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Karen mentioned that the lakefront was HOA property," he continued, gesturing to the water like he owned it. "We're thinking about setting up a little dock here for the family to use." "It's great, isn't it?" For a moment I was too stunned to speak. HOA property? My lakefront? Karen had no authority over my land and she knew it. "Let me stop you right there," I said, stepping closer. "This isn't HOA property. This is my property. You're trespassing." Brad's smirk faltered, but only for a second. "Karen said it's part of the community amenities," he argued. "She's the HOA president. I'm sure she knows what she's talking about." I took a deep breath, resisting the urge to launch into a full-blown tirade. "You're mistaken," I said firmly. "I have the deed to prove it. Now, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it if you packed up and left." Brad muttered something under his breath but didn't argue further. He gathered his things and left, casting a few annoyed glances my way. Later that afternoon, I confronted Karen. "Karen," I said, catching her as she pruned her already perfect rose bushes. "We need to talk about the lakefront." "Oh, hi there," she chirped, her tone saccharine. "What's on your mind?" "Your cousin was on my property this morning," I said, cutting straight to the point. "He claimed you told him it was HOA land." Her smile didn't waver, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe? "Oh, that must have been a misunderstanding," she said breezily. "I just meant the lake is for everyone's enjoyment." "The lake is public," I replied. "But the land leading to it is mine. You know that." Karen waved her pruning shears dismissively. "Oh, don't be so territorial. It's just a little space by the water. Surely you don't mind sharing." "I mind when people trespass," I shot back. "And I mind when misinformation leads to more problems. Let's make this clear. That land is private property. It's not up for debate." She huffed but didn't push further. For a moment I thought the issue was resolved. But I should have known better. The next morning I woke up to the sound of hammering. A group of workers was driving stakes into the ground by the lake. Bright orange tape stretched across the property line. My property line. Karen stood nearby, clipboard in hand, supervising like she was managing a construction project. "What the hell is this?" I demanded as I approached. "Oh, good morning," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "We're just marking the area for the new community dock. Isn't it exciting? It'll be such a great addition to the neighborhood." My fists clenched at my sides. "You can't do this," I said. "This is private property." "It's for the greater good," she said, her tone implying I was being unreasonable. "I'm sure the community will appreciate your cooperation." The audacity of this woman was beyond belief. It was clear Karen wasn't going to back down easily. But if she thought she could steamroll me, she had another thing coming. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen's arrogance had lit a fire under me. If she thought she could take my land without consequences, she was about to learn otherwise. That afternoon, I retrieved my property deed and survey maps from the safe. These documents were ironclad proof that the land in question was mine, and no amount of HOA meddling could change that. I also pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Photos of the stakes, the workers, and even Karen with her clipboard. It was time to take this fight to the next level. My first stop was the county assessor's office. I needed to confirm that the property lines on my documents matched what the county had on file. The clerk, a no-nonsense woman named Marjorie, examined my paperwork with a critical eye before pulling up the corresponding records on her computer. "Well, Mr. Carter, you're absolutely correct," she said, spinning the monitor so I could see the screen. "The lakefront portion is entirely within your property boundaries. The HOA has no jurisdiction here. Can I get a copy of this?" I asked. "Of course," she said, printing out the maps and stamping them with the county seal. Armed with the official documentation, I drove straight to the HOA office. The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, glanced up as I entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone indifferent. "I need to speak with the HOA president," I said. She frowned. "Miss Karen isn't in right now. Would you like to leave a message?" "Oh, I'll leave something all right," I muttered, more to myself than to her. I slid the copies of the county records across the desk. "Make sure Karen sees these," I said. "And tell her I'll be pursuing legal action if the trespassing doesn't stop immediately." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and set the papers aside. When I got home, I decided to dig deeper. Karen's actions were too bold to be random. There had to be a reason she was so determined to claim the lakefront. A quick search of public records revealed something interesting. Karen's cousin Brad had recently submitted a permit application for a private boat dock. That was the missing piece. Karen wasn't just trying to turn the lakefront into a community space. She was helping Brad secure exclusive access to it. I smiled to myself. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I could play smarter. Over the next few days, I prepared my case meticulously. I installed additional cameras to monitor the lakefront and recorded everything. Karen's workers returning, Brad inspecting the site, and Karen herself directing operations. Each video clip added to my growing arsenal of evidence. I also began reaching out to neighbors. Some of them had their own grievances with Karen, ranging from petty fines to outright harassment. Together, we started compiling a list of her abuses of power. Then I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board. The document was comprehensive, outlining not only her overreach on my property but also her history of misconduct. I attached the videos, photos, and copies of the county's records for good measure. To ensure my complaint wouldn't be swept under the rug, I sent a copy to the local news station. I knew a story about an overreaching HOA president would catch their attention, especially with such clear evidence. By the end of the week, the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Karen must have sensed that her position was in jeopardy, but she was doubling down instead of backing off. Workers continued to show up at the lakefront, and Brad had the audacity to start bringing construction materials for his dock project. I didn't stop them. Not yet. Every additional action they took only strengthened my case. And when the next HOA board meeting rolled around, I was ready to drop the hammer. I arrived early, laptop in hand, and took a seat at the front of the community center. The room filled quickly with curious neighbors and disgruntled residents eager to see what all the fuss was about. Karen entered last, clipboard in hand and a forced smile on her face. "Let's get started," she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. But tonight, Karen wasn't in control. I was. As the meeting began, I raised my hand to address the board. "I'd like to formally present a case against the HOA president for misconduct and illegal activity," I said. Karen's smile faltered. "That's a serious accusation," she said, her tone defensive. "Oh, it's more than serious," I replied, connecting my laptop to the projector. "And I have the evidence to prove it." The first slide appeared on the screen, a photo of Karen supervising workers on my property. The room fell silent as I walked the board through the timeline, each image and video clip painting a damning picture of Karen's actions. By the time I was finished, Karen's face was pale, and the murmurs from the crowd had turned into outright complaints. "This isn't personal property," Karen tried to argue. "It's for the community." I held up the county-stamped documents. "This says otherwise," I countered. "And if the HOA continues to support her actions, I'll have no choice but to take this to court." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. They knew they were in over their heads. Karen's reign was crumbling and I was just getting started. The HOA board meeting left Karen reeling, but I knew she wasn't done. If there was one thing Karen excelled at, it was doubling down when she was wrong. True to form, within a day of the meeting she started spreading rumors. According to her, I was some selfish recluse who didn't care about the neighborhood's progress. She framed the whole lakefront debacle as a misunderstanding, though her thinly veiled threats to neighbors who sided with me told another story. It was time to act decisively. The first step was securing my property. I hired a surveyor to clearly mark the boundaries of my land. Bright yellow flags and signs went up, explicitly stating, "Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." I also consulted a local attorney to draft a cease and desist letter addressed to both Karen and Brad, warning them of the legal consequences if they continued encroaching. But the centerpiece of my plan was the fence. This wasn't going to be just any fence. No, this was going to be a barrier so robust, so unmistakable, that not even Karen's most determined attempts could challenge it. I researched local zoning laws to ensure my construction was airtight, then hired a contractor to install a tall, solid fence along the entire lakefront portion of my property. The design was intentional. It wasn't just about keeping them out, it was about sending a message. The top of the fence featured decorative latticework shaped like waves, a nod to the lake they'd never access through my land again. The day construction began, Karen showed up, her clipboard clutched like a weapon. "You can't do this," she shouted, standing just outside the property line as workers poured cement for the posts. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed. "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "Everything's permitted and within code. If you have a problem, feel free to call the county." Her face turned crimson. "This is a violation of the community's aesthetics. It's an eyesore." "It's not an eyesore on my property," I replied, smirking. "And it's better than having trespassers ruining my lakefront." She stormed off in a huff, but I could tell this wasn't the end of it. True to form, Karen filed a complaint with the HOA board about the fence, claiming it damaged the neighborhood's visual harmony. But her complaint fell flat. The board, eager to distance themselves from her, ruled in my favor, citing the legal boundary of my land. It was one more nail in the coffin of her authority. While the fence went up, I worked on another project behind the scenes. Using my attorney's guidance, I filed a formal property encroachment lawsuit against Karen and Brad. The evidence I'd collected, combined with the clear survey markers, made my case airtight. They'd ignored my boundaries, used my land without permission, and now they'd face the consequences. The best part? Filing the lawsuit allowed me to file a lien on Brad's dock construction permit, effectively halting his project until the legal dispute was resolved. When Brad learned about the lawsuit, he showed up at my door, fuming. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "You're ruining my plans for no reason." "No reason?" I said, stepping outside to meet him face to face. "You and Karen tried to steal my land and build a dock without my consent. You think I'm just going to roll over and let it happen?" Brad sputtered, trying to form a response, but I cut him off. "If you want access to this lake, go find another spot. You're not welcome here." He left, but the satisfaction of standing my ground lingered. By the time the fence was complete, it was a masterpiece. Neighbors stopped by to admire it, some even thanking me for standing up to Karen. The tide of public opinion had shifted, and Karen's once loyal supporters were now openly questioning her leadership. The icing on the cake came when a local news station picked up the story. The headline read, "HOA President Faces Legal Trouble Over Property Dispute." The report highlighted my documentation, the fence, and Karen's repeated overreach. Karen hated bad press. Her smug demeanor was nowhere to be found when she showed up at the next HOA board meeting, where a group of neighbors formally called for a vote to remove her as president. The vote was scheduled for the following week. I knew I had one final play to make sure Karen's reign ended for good. It was time to finish what I'd started. The night of the HOA board vote was electric with anticipation. The community center was packed, and the air buzzed with murmurs of frustration, gossip, and the promise of change. Karen sat at the front of the room, her clipboard noticeably absent, replaced by an air of defiance. She looked like a monarch clinging to a crumbling throne, unwilling to admit her reign was over. The meeting began with routine agenda items, landscaping updates, parking discussions, but no one was paying attention. Everyone was waiting for the main event, the vote to remove Karen as HOA president. Finally, Mrs. Jenkins, the interim chair of the meeting, cleared her throat. Next on the agenda is the formal motion to remove Karen as president of the HOA due to repeated misconduct and abuse of authority. Mr. Carter, as the primary filer of this motion, you have the floor. I stood, laptop in hand, and walked to the front of the room. I connected it to the projector, letting the first slide, a clear aerial map of my property boundaries, fill the screen. "Good evening, neighbors," I began. "I'm here to present the case against Karen's actions as HOA president and to highlight how her overreach has not only impacted me but many of you as well." I methodically laid out the evidence, starting with the survey results, the photos of trespassing, and the unauthorized dock project. Then I played video clips from my security cameras showing Karen directing workers on my land and Brad inspecting the site. Each piece of evidence was damning, and the room grew quieter with every slide. Karen's expression shifted from smug to panicked as I played the final recording, a conversation between her and Brad where she told him, "Don't worry. The HOA will back us up and he can't do anything about it." When the recording ended, there was an audible gasp from the audience. "Karen has not only misused her position for personal gain," I said, addressing the crowd, "but she's also undermined the trust and integrity of this community. Her actions have put us all at risk, legally and financially. Is this the kind of leadership we want?" The room erupted into murmurs of agreement, and several neighbors began sharing their own grievances: unfair fines, arbitrary rules, and outright harassment. Mrs. Jenkins raised her hand for silence. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," she said. "Karen, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Karen stood, her face pale but defiant. "This is a smear campaign," she said, her voice trembling with indignation. "I've always acted in the best interest of the community. This is just an attempt to undermine me." But her words rang hollow. The evidence was overwhelming and the room's mood was clear. Mrs. Jenkins called for the vote and it was swift. Karen was removed as HOA president in a unanimous decision, her tenure ending with a resounding chorus of applause. As Karen stormed out of the room, clutching her purse like a lifeline, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But I wasn't done. There was still the matter of the lawsuit. Over the next few weeks, the community began to rebuild. The new HOA board, now under Mrs. Jenkins' leadership, implemented a transparency policy, making all financial records and decisions publicly accessible. This small step helped restore trust among the neighbors. Meanwhile, Karen's legal troubles grew. My lawsuit moved forward, and Brad's dock permit was officially revoked by the county. With no way to continue his project and mounting legal fees, he quietly sold his property and left town. But the best was yet to come. Using the settlement funds from the lawsuit, I transformed my lakefront into something truly special: a private nature reserve. I partnered with a local conservation group to restore the shoreline, plant native vegetation, and install birdwatching stations. The reserve wasn't just for me, it was open to the entire neighborhood, a reminder of what we could achieve when we worked together. On the day we unveiled the new reserve, the entire community showed up. Families walked the trails, kids played by the water, and neighbors who had once been divided by Karen's antics came together to celebrate. As I watched the sun set over the lake, its golden light dancing on the water, I couldn't help but smile. Karen had tried to claim my land for her own gain, but in the end, her actions brought the community closer and created something far greater than her petty power plays. Justice wasn't just served, it was celebrated.